Hi, I'm Eric from Simply Elegant Home Cooking. Today I'm going to show you how to make fresh pasta. This is a really elegant home-cooked recipe, but it's easier than you think. A lot of people are intimidated by this. Once you do it a time or two, this is really simple. It's going to blow away anything that you've ever been served at an Italian restaurant, and you can make it at home. So stick around and I'm going to show you how it's done. And this is the exact product I'm going to be using today to make the fresh pasta noodles, the Kitchenaid 3-piece pasta roller and cutter set. Now just to be clear, I'm not shilling for this product. I don't have any affiliate links or anything like that, but I purchased this and was really happy with the results. So it's something I feel I can share with my audience in good faith. This is a product that I do recommend. If you don't want to go out and buy this though, there are other alternatives. You can get the hand crank pasta machines, or you could even do this using a rolling pin and a knife, although it is certainly a lot more work than it is using a machine like this. And it really is pretty clear the moment you take these pieces out of the box that these are really high quality. These are all made in Italy, stainless steel. We have the pasta roller, fettuccine cutter, and a spaghetti cutter. So this will let us make a variety of different pasta shapes. So here's the flours that we're going to be using today in our fresh pasta. On the left we have what's called 00 flour, and we also have Semolina flour. Now both of these are imported from Italy. They're going to give you the best quality results. You can just use all-purpose flour, but if you have access to these, if you can find them at your grocery store, I highly recommend that you splurge and go for these. They're a higher quality and it's really going to come through in the finished result. And I've measured out 2½ cups of the 00 flour into the bowl of my Kitchenaid mixer. And on top of that, I'm going to add 1 cup of the Semolina flour. I find that that's the optimal ratio. Using a fork, I've dug out a little well in the center of that mound of the flour. And to that, I'm going to add 4 whole eggs. Now you'll notice that the yolks of my eggs are really bright orange. You want to use really high quality eggs, preferably free-range eggs. In addition to the 4 whole eggs, I'm going to add 1 additional yolk. I've separated that out, so we're going to add just the yolk of a 5th egg. That's going to really help the richness of the pasta. I'm also going to add a little bit of sea salt, just a pinch. I'm going to add maybe about a teaspoon of extra virgin olive oil. And additionally, I'm going to add a little bit of water. Now there's no set amount. This can really vary depending on, the humidity and just a bunch of other factors. So what I like to do, I like to add just a little bit to start with. I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons to start with, and we're going to just go by feel. We're going to judge the moisture content of our dough as we go. So it's likely that I'm going to add a little bit more, but 2 tablespoons is a good amount to start with. And I should also note, I'm doing this all in my Kitchenaid mixer. Everything we're doing here, kneading the dough, this can all be done by hand. I find it's easier to use a mixer. So if you have one of these, I recommend you use it. But what we want to do, now we have all of our ingredients for our dough. I'm going to just go in there with a fork and just kind of gently beat up these eggs. Just kind of start slowly incorporating the flour. We're doing this in the bowl, and this prevents us from making a big mess. So we don't have to be too thorough at this point because we're going to eventually use the mixer to incorporate this, but I'm going to just get the process started with a fork because it's easier. So we'll check back in just a minute. Okay, so after just about a minute or 2 of mixing up those eggs with a fork, I've added the flat beater to my Kitchenaid mixer, and at this point we can get the process started. I'm going to just turn this on and allow this to incorporate for a couple of moments. And after about a minute, we can already see this starting to come together a little bit. Now I can tell just from experience, this looks a little dry, so I'm going to add another tablespoon of water. And we're going to let that go, let that incorporate. And after a couple more moments, I've swapped out that flat beater and I've added my dough hook. So we're going to let this go until this forms a solid ball. Okay, and that didn't take long. You can see that's coming together. Now the dough still looks a little dry, so I'm going to add a 4th tablespoon of water in there just to loosen that up a bit. We're going to let this go just another minute or 2, and then we're going to switch and finish this up using our hands. Okay, so the easy part is out of the way. We've used our Kitchenaid mixer to get the process started, but we're going to finish this up with our hands. So what I've done, I've laid out some flour on the surface. You want to be sure to get a little bit of this on your hands just to prevent the dough from sticking. So put it on the counter first or wherever your work surface is. Rub a little on your hands. And now what we're going to do, we are going to knead the dough. So with this, you just want to use your hands, and you can even use your body weight, kind of lean into this. We just want to knead this, and we want to let this go for probably a good 7 or 8 minutes. I really go by feel. You know, there's not an exact time with this, but we want to go until it has a consistency almost like Play-Doh. We don't want the dough sticky, and we are going to add either a little bit more flour or a little bit more water as we go. This is the step. It really just kind of comes with experience. I'm probably going to add just a little bit more water to this dough at some point, but we're pretty close to the consistency we want. So I'm going to continue kneading with my hands, and we're going to check back in a couple of minutes once the dough is ready. Okay, and after about 8 minutes, this is the perfect consistency. I added just about another ½ tablespoon of water, so we went with a total of 4½ tablespoons. And the perfect consistency with your dough, it should not be sticky at all. I don't have any of that dough, stuck to my hands, but it's also not dry. So this comes a little bit with experience, but you want to just play around with the flour to water content, until it looks about like this. So we've kneaded this plenty. Now at this point, we want to let the dough rest. So what I want to do is I want to kind of just form this into a ball shape. Just kind of roll it in on itself like so. And this is really, really important. We want to make sure that our dough does not dry out on us. So we're going to get some cling wrap and just wrap this as tight as we can on all sides. Get as much of that air out as you possibly can. Okay, and that's how our dough ball looks. We have it wrapped up tightly in the cling wrap. Now, I'm going to let this sit out for about an hour. You want to let it go a minimum of 30 minutes, but I actually find that an hour is best. You can let it go overnight. If you're going to do that, it's best to let it sit in the fridge. And what we want to do, which is not an issue today because I'm only going to let it sit for an hour, if you do take it overnight, just make sure that you set it out and bring it to room temperature before we go to cut it into the pasta noodles. Okay, so we let our dough rest for about an hour. This should be ready. That just helps develop those glutens and loosens up the dough, makes it easier to work with. So I'm just going to carefully peel that away. Now what we want to do, we want to make sure that the dough doesn't dry out on us. So you want to work with just a section at a time. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use some kitchen shears, and I'm going to start by cutting this in half. And then I'm going to cut the half in half. So we're going to have 4 quarters. And what this does, this is going to allow us to have the dough not dry out on us. So what you want to do, we're going to start with just 1/4 of the dough, and we're going to wrap the rest of that back just to prevent it from drying out. Very, very important. Easier than you think to let the dough dry out on you. Okay, now we just want to prep our workstation. Start with a little bit more of the flour. We're going to get it on our hands and on top. And I have a rolling pin. So what we want to do, we want to just start by just kind of flattening this out just a bit before we go to the pasta machine. And using this flour is going to prevent it from sticking to the machine. So we just want to flatten this a bit. Just like that. Okay, and I have the rolling attachment set up. I want to start by just dusting this with a little bit of flour. Again, this is just to prevent the sticking. And now we can begin. I'm going to turn on the mixer. And we can just slowly feed the dough through. And what we want to do, there's an adjustment here on the attachment. You just want to start out on the thickest setting and scale it back 1 notch at a time every time you run the dough through. So it'll get thinner and thinner as you go. And you don't want to use your finger so much, you want to drape it over your hands. That's the best way of controlling the dough like I'm doing. We're going to just scale back the thickness one more notch. And off camera, I just added a little bit more flour to the actual dough. Scaled back our thickness again. We're going to run the dough through again. Now you can see this is really easy. This is only the third time I've used my machine. This is not difficult at all. There's just a certain touch you want to get, letting the dough kind of drape over your hands. And I'm going to run it through one last time. Now to make this a little easier to work with, I cut the length of the dough in half. It gets kind of long as you're working with it. So it can be a good idea to cut it just to give you a manageable piece to work with. So we're going to feed it through one last time. And the guide that you should go with is you should be able to see your hand through the dough. At that point, you have it thin enough, and that's where you want to stop. And I'm going to just run through the other half now. And you saw how easy that was. This is not complicated. So I have now switched out. I took the roller off and I have the fettuccine cutter. Again, I'm going to just go in with a little bit of that flour just to prevent sticking. And we can turn this on and begin cutting the noodles. And it's easy. You just want to feed the dough through the exact same way as when you rolled it. And now we can feed the other half of the dough through. And once you run these through the cutter, you just want to take a little bit more of that flour, just kind of sprinkle that on, and just kind of move them around. This is, again, just going to prevent sticking. So we want to kind of just dust these with flours and form them into nests. That one's a little sloppy looking. Here's how it's supposed to look. Okay, and if we wanted, we could continue cutting the rest of the pasta. We only did 1/4 of what we made. I'm actually going to freeze the rest. It freezes well, and I can use that at a later time. But now we're going to cook it up, and this is really simple. What you want to do, you want to bring some water to a rapid boil, add a decent amount of salt, and then you can just add in your fresh pasta noodles. Now these are going to cook really quickly. These only take maybe about 90 seconds to 2 minutes for noodles of this size. They cook a lot quicker than the normal box pasta. So you just you want to be sure not to overcook it. So you want to get it in there and stir it around a bit. We're going to let this come back up to a boil. And I've also got a sauce cooking here. Now I'm just doing a very basic marinara. This is homemade using San Marzano tomatoes, some extra virgin olive oil, garlic, and some Italian herbs and spices. Just a touch of Italian red wine vinegar. Really simple sauces go well with the pasta. You want to be sure not to use a really heavy sauce because you want those noodles to shine through. So after just about 90 seconds, we're going to add that in and marry the sauce to the pasta. Trying not to make a mess. And now at this point, I'm going to turn up the heat to medium-high. We're going to just stir that pasta around and let the sauce coat the noodles. This is a really important part of the process when you make pasta. Now you may have noticed that I did not drain the noodles. You want some of that starch water to come through, and I'm going to add a small amount additionally just to loosen that up and really help it meld with the sauce and the noodles. And in just a moment, we are going to be ready to serve this up. Okay, and that's what you're looking for and listening for. You want to hear it sizzle. So once it has sizzled, reduced a bit, and nicely coated your fettuccine noodles, we're going to turn off the heat. And at this point, I'm going to add some fresh herbs. I'm going to add some fresh basil that I have just torn up into pieces. Get that in there and give it a big stir to mix everything around. And I'm also going to grate on some aged Parmigiano Reggiano. This is a 24-month aged. You want to be sure to buy the highest quality you can find. It's really going to come through in the quality. So we're going to grate on a generous portion over top. And we're going to just give that another big stir to incorporate everything, the sauce, the cheese, the basil, and those fresh homemade pasta noodles. And we are ready to serve this up. Okay, and once you plate up your fresh fettuccine noodles with homemade marinara sauce, just the finishing touches, just a very small drizzle of the highest quality extra virgin olive oil that you have. I'm going to go on with some black pepper, just a pinch of crushed red pepper flakes. There's some in the sauce already. And I'm going to finish on with a little bit more of that grated Parmigiano Reggiano. All right, this looks delicious. Okay, so let's dig in and see how everything turned out. I like to eat this with a spoon and a fork. So that's just so good. With this pasta, because we homemade, we made this from scratch using the highest quality ingredients, it actually has a really nice flavor. It's very different from what you get in the box, which is just kind of bland. With this, those noodles are actually the star of the show. We used a basic sauce so we can taste, everything that we put into that, into the noodles. I really hope you enjoyed this recipe. This was really more, not so much of a recipe video. It was a review of the Kitchenaid 3-piece pasta roller and cutter set that we use to make these noodles. Now you can use that same exact method with other pasta rollers and cutters, but I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments or questions about either the product or the process that I use to make this, definitely leave me a comment below and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. And be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm Eric from Simply Elegant Home Cooking, and I'll see you again soon.